Hi, today I'm coming back to share another tip or an exercise that you can do that can help you to move on and get through your breakup. So all of this is coming from I Can't Believe How Much This Hurts. You can actually find this book on Amazon.com. I will leave the link below in the description. Also, it's always going to be in my bio. So today's tip is all about how to move through or to deal with your grief as you're grieving. So, the idea is pretty much that we grieve all loss. So even if it was a necessary loss, and sometimes this is kind of what messes us up in breakups. So we'll begin to grieve someone, and maybe we're even the one who let it go or let them go or wanted it to end, or maybe it just ended, but you know somewhere deep down inside that it needed to, and this is for the best, but then you start to really miss them and be really sad. So it makes us question our decision or make us think like, oh, maybe that was wrong. Maybe I am supposed to be with this person because I'm crying over them or I can't stop thinking about them. But remember, you do grieve all loss. So it could be that it was a mistake. That's always a possibility. But it could also just be grief. And sometimes we have to get through the grief and then reassess and decide, was this a mistake? Or actually now I'm through the grief and I'm really glad I didn't reach back out. So that's something you have to decide. So this is a grief exercise that you can do really anytime you experience grief, but I find it really helpful when someone is going through a breakup. So all you do, you could get a notebook, which personally I like to write more, so I use a notebook. So if you're someone who has a lot of thoughts, you already know you write quite a bit when you do write to get stuff out of your head, then you probably want to do the notebook way, but you could also use 3x5 index cards. If you go to the book, it starts actually talking about this in chapter 1. You start right out of the gate going through your grief. By the way, you can do this exercise whether you broke up recently or like a couple months ago or years ago. It actually doesn't matter how long ago the loss occurred, as long as you're still having emotions that you know you just have not really looked at, then this is going to be a good exercise for you. So there's no rule, just like there's really no rules with grief. Grief is kind of an anomaly. Everybody grieves different. Everyone looks different while they're grieving. You're going to experience grief differently at different times along the way. So there's the only real rule with grief is that everyone's going to grieve differently, and grief is going to look different with each of your experiences. So it's kind of just all over the place. So with this, if you're going to use the notebook method, then what you want to do, you could Google common emotions or feelings with grief, or emotions associated with grief, or grieving emotions. And then you're going to get a big old list of emotions. On page 8 in the book, it actually has it laid out to have if you're using index cards. So what you want to do is take your notebook. We'll just do the notebook first. Let me just make this easy. If you're going to do the notebook method, then I like to just write at the top of a page an emotion. So if after you Google common emotions with grief, or you go to the book page 8, some emotions, let me just give you some examples. It could be shock, scared, regret, disappointment, insecure, embarrassed, ashamed, right? Chances are, looking back at some of our behavior, we could feel shame, we could feel embarrassed about certain ways we responded or reacted, or maybe you were embarrassed by your ex. Whatever the embarrassment is or that you're feeling, that's what you write about. So at the top of a sheet, you're going to write the emotion, and then when you do your grief work, you're going to just write every way that your mind associates with that emotion. And then you would have another page for a new emotion. So that would be the notebook method, right? So before I tell you about the index card method, which is similar, first thing we want to do is set some parameters around our grieving. So grief can just be overwhelming, all-consuming, right? Just like the ocean. Sometimes it's calm, and sometimes it just comes and just knocks you down, right? So we don't want to just keep allowing it to just overtake us and sweep us away to whatever direction it wants to anytime the grief comes up. So we want to start to set some boundaries with our grief. A good thing you could do, or a tip to know, is you can decide, okay, I have time, let's just say Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock, and that's when I'm going to do my grief work. So then Wednesday nights, 6 o'clock, I'm going to pull my notebook out, and I'm going to flip through these emotions that I have listed out, pick an emotion that I've been experiencing for that day or that week, however often I'm doing it, and that's when I'm going to write about it. And then it's really helpful to limit the amount of time. So I may say, okay, I'm going to dedicate 30 minutes on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock where I'm going to do my grief work. So I am going to take my phone, I'm going to set it for 30 minutes, set a timer, and then I'm going to flip through, find an emotion that I'm relating to, maybe even just in that moment. And then I'm just going to write as much as I can. And my whole goal is to get from my head out onto the paper as I relate to that emotion. And if I still have time when I'm done with that emotion, I'm going to go on to another emotion and write as much as I can about that. And when my timer goes off, I'm going to finish up my sentence and then I'm going to put it away. That way, when I'm at work, for example, let's say I'm at school or I'm at work or I'm with my family and I feel that wave of grief starting to overtake me, then I'm just going to pay attention and I'm going to be mindful. Okay, so this is coming up for me. I may even put a note like in my phone and just know this came up for me. Thank you, brain. I will look at this, but I'm not going to look at it right now. I will look at this on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. See how that works? So I start to take my life back from my grief. And this gets easier and easier. The more times you pay attention, because your brain wants you to pay attention. Yes, I'm paying attention. I will take a look at this. Thank you for letting me know, but it's not going to be today or right this moment. I'm going to look at it Wednesday at 6. When you first are coming out of a breakup, you may find you need to do grief work much more often in a week's time. You may even do it a couple times throughout the day. Remember, there's no hard and fast rule outside of there is no hard and fast rules when it comes to grief. So if it's really overwhelming, if you're finding that you're having a hard time dealing with it, then you might just want to set some more time aside to do the grief work. But most people find, as have I, that as time passed, I needed to do it less and less and less until I really didn't have anything to write about anymore. So for me, that's when I kind of knew I was done, right? I would sit down and be like, I just don't feel the same. I don't hurt like I did. I don't really have anything left to really dig up and look at it. I'm good. So it's a good idea to have a lot of emotions available because for most of us, we know like sad, mad, and happy, right? Sad, mad, and glad. But there's lots of emotions, right? We might not think about embarrassed. We might not think of ashamed. We might not think of shock. So that's why it's really good to sort of pull in another resource to give you more vocabulary so that you have more to write about because it's usually in there, right? Okay, so now as promised, we're going to look at how do you do the index exercise. It's the same exercise except for on one side of an index card. Sorry, I wish I had one. I don't currently have an index card. But you would just write what's the emotion on one side, and then you flip the card over, and that's where you're going to write. So for someone like me, and if you're like me and you like to write, right, you like to get it out, then the index card, you're going to need like 1,000 index cards for one emotion. So this is where I'd like to just use a plain old notebook. Just go to the dollar store. If you have a dollar store in your area, you could use computer notebook paper. You could even do it on a computer if you're more comfortable. There's really no rule. The main thing is provide lots of vocabulary, give yourself lots of emotions, set a timer, pick a specific time when you're going to look at it, and then also make sure you're using lots of different emotions, not just a few, right? So that is a tip and a trick on how to get a handle on your grief and begin to process it so that you can move on. Again, if it's ever overwhelming, just take a break, walk away from it. Even if your timer is not going off and you're like, I just can't do this anymore, listen to yourself. If you're saying I can't do this anymore, that's okay. Take a break and then you can come back to it. Sometimes you just need a minute to go cry or go for a walk or just try to talk to somebody, right? I think breakups are very isolating because we kind of tend to burn the people out closest to us where they're like, I cannot hear this again, right? And you're like, I know, I don't blame you, but I really can't stop talking about it. I can't stop talking about it. So this is why this grief work is so wonderful because you can talk about it as much as you want. You're talking about it to yourself. And that's who needs to make sense of your breakup is you, right? But if you want to go talk to someone, get a different perspective or just talk about something different for a minute, you could always go back to your exercise or just count it done for the day. If it's ever too overwhelming, then I really encourage you to seek help. You can find a local therapist in your area. One tool that I really like is psychologytoday.com. If you just Google psychologytoday.com, you can actually look for a therapist in your area. You could search by the issue you're facing, the type of insurance you have, if you prefer a specific gender or a type of treatment that they provide. We call that modality. But if you're looking for someone who does CBT, someone who does DBT, and if you don't know what that is, that's okay. You don't have to know. You could just know this is the person who I'm looking for. And the other thing I like is it shows their picture, and it also, they write a little something about themselves. So you can kind of like see their personality and find a bit more out about them before you just, walk into someone's office or jump on a virtual meeting. So that way you can kind of feel a bit better about who you're choosing to go, open up with. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm so sorry that you're going through a breakup, and even if it's been a long time, even that can be embarrassing. The fact that I can't let this person go after this long is embarrassing, but it's okay. Remember, there's no rules to grief. So the biggest thing is take control of the grief as much as you can, set some boundaries with it, and schedule time for it, and begin to get some of that out of you. Hope you found it helpful. Again, the book, I Can't Believe How Much This Hurts. It's short, sweet, to the point, has lots of great exercises for you to go through to get through your breakup. So you're totally, starting as fresh as you can by the time you find your next person. So take good care, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.